Hi, everyone. This is Bob,
And this is Archie.
and we're going to continue talking about technical writing and how to be one and the different levels. In our previous episode, we talked about how you can get a position as a technical writer and the things you're bound to encounter as a beginning technical writer. In today's episode, we're going to talk more about the levels of technical writing and how you can grow your career, which we have done, and there are certainly more levels and fascinating aspects of it. Depends on what you want to do. The field is wide open.
And I guess I have to throw in because I just thought of this. Sorry, but you also okay. So now you're a technical writer.
Now you're a technical
yeah,
writer.
you've been doing it for 2 or 3 years, and you're starting looking at the landscape in terms to growing your career. You have two options. You can become an expert technical writer, or you can go into management, which kind of it's still technical writing, but it's more managing the process of technical writing and managing the results of a technical writing effort. So we can talk a little bit about that as we go along.
Oh yeah, there are many career paths.
Yes.
Now, I focused myself on the actual technical writing path. I did do some supervisory things, and I was actually a manager at one point in time for a small startup. But I decided I liked the nuts and bolts of this career, and then designing, and then creating. I found all that better suited to my lifestyle and my interests.
And I did management for 10 years in my career, and I loved it because it was it's kind of like why people become police officers. It's something new every day. Never get bored. There's always a new crisis. Kept you on your toes. Kept me on my toes. I always had to think about different aspects of what was going on, and because usually, okay, so when you're a writer, you're usually focused on 1 or 2 projects. When you're a manager, you're focused on maybe 5 or 10 projects across a department of people who are working on a bunch of different things. And you have to keep in your mind, what's going on over there, what's going on over there. If something happens and you need to shift resources, and it's just, for me, I just got a kick out of it. I loved it. I never got bored.
Now, if you're working for a very small company, especially a startup, then it's all in one. You're doing everything.
Right, and that's the equivalent, because you're the department of one. So that can grow into management as the company grows and you need more resources. If you can't do everything, you're going to bring in other people, and then you'll kind of become de facto manager or project leader, which is kind of the same thing. In bigger corporations, the manager's role is somewhat more complex, but same thing.
So let's examine the different levels and the duties and responsibilities and how it can affect your career and how it's affected ours.
Yes.
I think the first part is I became more interested in what users really, really needed. And what I did at Digital was to form some groups, and we went out and visited customers. We went to their sites, and we saw how the product was being used in their environment. And that was a fascinating experience, because it gave us a different perspective. Now, also at that time, I decided to use the product myself and my team. I had a small team, and we got the product up for our exclusive use. Back then, for people who are familiar with these things, it was a terminal server. So we had to manage it. I was writing the management guide of that, so I actually had my other writers plug in as users so they could write it from their perspectives. And we completely took this machine and we owned it. Everything. We did everything to it, and it all improved the documentation because our knowledge of the product got better and better. So the next level up is understanding the product, managing the product, and becoming better adept at what the technology is and how it is going to affect your users.
And it's funny, as you speak about the digital experience, I'm starting to realize how I ended up in management, because I started out as a hardware writer, okay, and
As did I.
And I still like hardware. I mean, I still like touching things and taking them apart and messing with them, right? I still like touching stuff.
Yeah, I don't let them touch my stuff, though.
Maybe. But when I went to digital, that was all software. At least when I came to digital, it was software. That's what they were hiring me for. And I just remember during the interview, they said, well, you're a hardware writer. What makes you think you can write software? I said, well, software writing should be much easier, right? The interface is the interface should define the product. All I'm doing is documenting an interface. It's easy, right? And it was. So yeah, that I think once I got into that, I realized, yeah, this is not going to keep me interested, and that's when I went into management. I remember that. That's what it was. I was, it was the kind of thing. The first project I was on a team of 4 people. The part of it that I was responsible for, I did it in a couple of weeks, and so I was kind of like trying to help the other team members get their stuff done quicker, which went over like a lead balloon with them. But that's how I ended up in management. Okay, so
And then you could tell them what to do.
so yeah, so all that 10 years of management, mostly at digital in the software business, and so when I left management, went back to individual contributor. Now I'm realizing the reason I ended up in medical devices is because medical devices is hardware and software. So I got to get back to touching stuff and also working software. So that was a lot more interesting to me than just software.
Right.
That's how that happened. Now I remember.
So your career followed your interest.
Right.
Which is, I think, the best way to go.
Yeah.
Now, for me, you mentioned something, documenting the interface, which is clearly one of the first steps with documenting software. It's like, oh, you see all this stuff. This is what it means. This is what you got to do. That is a low level of documentation, a baseline, we'll call it.
That's right.
Not just a low level, but a baseline.
Right.
Okay, you need to understand what you're seeing. I was recently at a startup company where I had to do exactly that. That low level, saying, okay, this is all the stuff you're going to see. You click this, all this is going to happen. Now, the next step was, why are you seeing this? Now, what kind of task are you trying to do that you can use our product for? Now I flipped the perspective, and what I did was I started going after the customer support people and the technical marketing assistants and talked to them about, so what problems are we trying to solve in a customer's environment? It's a higher level, taking their task, saying, gee, what we're really trying to do is stop hackers. Well, in this case, we need to understand how many of our machines actually have all this security software on it, how many don't, and at what level there are. Okay, that was a real world question that our product could do.
Mm-hmm.
How to do it. Okay, explaining what was on the screen wasn't good enough. I had to tell them where to start, where to go next, and how to get that information.
Right.
Okay, so that was a whole real world explaining what your tasks are and using the product. That was the next level up from really a basic technical writer.
And that's kind of a natural progression, right? In other words, you start by documenting an interface. At least that's your assignment most of the time, right? And then you start realizing, well, wait a minute, what is the customer trying to do? And then how does this interface help them do it? And that's like the next level of thinking, which is what you were describing, right? And then the next level is, why would anybody buy this product over somebody else's necessarily? Not necessarily a competition piece, but more, why is this product something that more effective than what's out there? Because when people introduce a new product, when you're documenting a new product, there's a reason they developed that product, right? It's because they think that their product can do the task that the user's trying to accomplish better than what's already out there.
I'm going to hold off on that just a tiny bit because that is what we call a differentiator. Why is our product better? Okay, that is more advanced technical writing, and that gets into the realm of marketing, sales.
Okay, so as I've talked about in the past, I think that information design and development has to encompass all of that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that is the next level, is information design.
Yes.
And so let's talk about that a little bit. Now, most products aren't easy anymore. I mean, while we work with corporate products, we don't we don't do products that you get on your phone. We don't do mobile apps. We're talking about very complex network security, medical devices, all sorts of things. And these are deployed at a corporate level in these huge IT rooms or by doctors, medical professions, hospitals. Okay, This is not simple stuff. So now we're saying, okay, well, you wanted to see, what security software is on which machines in your environment. Now we're talking about how do we stop hackers from coming in completely? How do we block it from coming in from the internet? You doing all these things for our network cloud. A lot more complex. Now we talk about information design. Okay, now you have multiple groups using this product for different reasons. So you got to identify those groups. You want to have what we call maybe a system manager who says, I need to deploy this thing. I need to know how it interacts with my other apps. I need to know how it's going to affect resources. I need to know how much disk space I need. Okay, that's one aspect of the product. You have somebody else saying, well, I need to understand what rules and other things I need to do specific to my environment that my end users can use, to go after hackers or understand or get this information. So that's kind of an administrator that sets up the configuration of the product. Then you have end users who are actually trying to use the product, and their level, or actually their perspective of the product, is very small. And you don't want to give them a ton of information that they'll get lost in. You want to give them very specific information. Now, this is design. This is identifying all these groups, the information that they need, and separating it and organizing it so it gets to the right people and everybody can do their jobs.
And I'll just relate, to use another example, basically the same, basically to bolster what you're saying is that in medical devices, for example, it was eye-opening, and I think I said this before, to see an operating room and see a product being used in an operating room, and how many people were in that room, and how many people touch that equipment. When people talk about medical devices, when people ask me, okay, yeah, I document medical devices. Oh, so you write for the doctors? Not really. Okay? The doctor already knows how to do surgery. What I'm trying to do is help that doctor understand how this thing that we're selling them is going to help him do a surgery he or she knows how to do faster and more accurately, right? And the thing about it is, a typical medical device, there's the person who sets it up in the OR. There's a person who tests it to make sure that it's working properly before the doctor even walks in the room. Then there's the person who maintains it after it comes out of the operating out of the operating theater. The person the people who, there's another group of people who sterilize all the instruments. Anything that touches the body has to be sterilized in a specific way to make sure that it's used. So there's like a ton of people that interact with this device. Actually, the least amount of information is the stuff written for the doctor. and that was a fascinating revelation when I got into it. It's like, yeah, it's not about the doctor; it's about all the other people.
Yeah. Again, it's all. Yeah. This is all part of what we call information design. So a lot of writers who are more experienced will call themselves information designers, and that is about identifying all these groups and writing the documentation for them. And like I said, in the organization. So you have a medical example, you have a network security example. There are tons of examples out there where most products now are very complex, different people touching them for different reasons.
But what's interesting in the medical device industry, it's really funny because I brought that up and I was trying to architect the documentation based on that. I said, I'm going to have a booklet for, the people who do sterilization. I'm going to have a booklet specifically for them and then this and that. And I was working with a UI engineer and he loved that idea. But there's surprisingly few user manuals for medical devices that are set up that way. I remember one company I was working with, they had a book that was like 600 pages. It had all that stuff in it. And what started to happen was they were, so the person who had to sterilize the instruments, it's like, okay, how do I do this? Oh, it's on page 400. So as a result, what they were starting to do is pull out those sections and create little booklets and stuff. So now all of a sudden, instead of one book, you had 10 books. That turned into 20 books because each little group that needed a specific piece of information couldn't find it in the big book. So they were pulling it out and creating little cheat sheets and all this other stuff. And if they had done it right the first time, they wouldn't have had to do that.
Exactly.
Okay, so
you're making the customers work, for their documentation.
Right.
Yeah, and so now that is basically what an information designer. I'm sure that if you've been into technical writing, you've heard the term bounced around. Now, unfortunately, a lot of these terms, information designer, we'll talk about information architect and other things, the terms are kind of vague and sometimes used differently. There's no real concrete definition, but we're going to go over more of the examples. Now, information architect. Okay, how is that different from an information designer? There are actually two definitions I've seen out there. One is, I'll just mention it briefly, but I don't think we're going to go too much into it, is like setting up the tools that the writers are going to use. What format are we going to be using? Microsoft Word? Are we going to be using this web development tool? Are we going to be using, the different types of tools that you'll need for publication? That's more of a tools-oriented role, and sometimes they'll call themselves an information architect.
Okay, and I know that's one, and that's one aspect, but I will say that I think that particular role will probably be obviated in the very near future as they go to content management systems, because that kind of eliminates all those pieces.
Well, let's explain what a content management system is first, in case you don't know.
Okay, so well, one of the things way back when, in the old print days, a lot of the same information gets put in different books, and so in the old days, you'd had to go, and if any change happened, you had to open up 10 or 15 books and make the same change to each book. Content management is all about reuse, and so if you know something in the information set is going to change on a regular basis, but it's in several places, these content management systems will manage that. So you change it in one place, and it cascades that change to every place that piece is used. And so if you do that enough, then you can munge that information any way you want. You can move it around. You can turn it into an online piece. You can turn it into a print piece. You can add video to it and make it and make it part of that. And so these content management systems it's an environment. And so you don't have to worry about whether you're going to use Microsoft Word or Interleaf or you're in this environment. You work with your snippets. You put your snippets together the way you want and create whatever output you want all in one system.
Right. And a person that would put that together is really kind of an information architect.
Correct. And the thing is, most of the time, those people who do that are not necessarily technical writers.
Yes.
Right.
It is a form of technical writing, but it's managing the internal process of technical writing and how you're going to get information to different places. Now, they do need to understand a bit of the roles in the audience and stuff like that to understand that this information could appear in multiple places.
And that's the whole, and the architecture piece. And it's really kind of interesting because I started playing around with the idea of calling myself an information architect. But I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm designing all the pieces and I'm trying to understand how all the pieces are together. So let's say I was putting together a content management system, I'd know how to do that, right? But really and truly, that's a very limited role. Okay, so once you've architected it, then what? All right.
They need writers to write it.
Exactly. So
you need the information.
Yeah. So I mean, what I like about the term information specialist, design specialist.
Oh, we haven't gotten there yet.
But the idea is to make it broader and less concrete. In other words, you go from the concrete, which is technical writer is kind of technical writer. That term has a definite connotation, and it's not a good one, by the way. And as you go higher up in level,
much if you want to be a technical writer.
Yeah,
don't bother.
Well, okay. So there are a lot of people who think of technical writers as glorified editors, really. Right? Okay. So, and the thing is, we used to have editors, and all those editors became quote technical writers, and that's part of the perception problem of technical writing. Is a lot of editors became technical writers, and they're not technical writers; they're editors. So
yes,
yeah. I'm hoping that most of those editors are out of the field by now because it goes back.
No, they're still there. Yeah, that's a very low level technical writing. Yeah. But we, right now we're on information designers, and you did mention information specialist, which is the only person I know is an information specialist is me. I haven't heard anybody use that term. It's a new term coined, and
I mean they don't. I mean I think okay. So I think one of the terms that's used right now is information designer.
Yes, that's very common.
Yes, and so
information architect.
Yeah, architect and designer. So just going back to architecture a little bit, there is a specialized field of information architecture that I think is an outgrowth of library science. So people who are librarians, the people who work with the Dewey Decimal System and understand how to categorize information, that is a form of information architecture. And a lot of those people transitioned into software and do that for if you're developing a website or you're developing an online information system, those people who know how to develop taxonomies for information and put it into a database so that it can be displayed, those are information architects. That's a very specialized area of information architecture.
And it's not always used the same way
Yeah.
with different folks, but
Right.
I agree with basically that's what an information architect is. Then we have user experience. And I once called myself a user experience analyst, which I still think is a nice term, but it's changed so much. Basically, the user experience analyst was really focusing on getting to know the customers, the end users, the people who use the product, how they use the product, where they use the product, what environmental challenges they had to do the product. So it was kind of a focused field on understanding the user experience. Then we get into usability, because when you do the user experience analyst part, you go back to the product and say, if you change the user interface this way and give them that type of information as they're doing it, we don't have to write about it, and it would make their job easier. So there's a fine line between usability and user experience. And I think it all kind of munges together. But that is also a form of technical writing.
But it's also a specialty.
It's also a specialty.
It's also a specialty.
It's also a form of usability, too.
Yeah, because I know I went into one company, and they were having a problem with their user guide. The users were having real trouble using this thing, and they had all this information in it. And I'm sitting in the interview, and they're telling me about their problems, and I'm like, did you ever do a usability study on the product? And in medical devices, they had to. So they said, sure, and they handed me this book. It had all the personas, all the people who are using the products, how they use it, where they use it, all the information I need to redesign this book. And it was like a snap after that. But nobody in that company thought to do that. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of funny.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's where the user experience, if you hear that term, okay, it's a fuzzy term. It could be usability and making the product better, which is typically making the user interface better. Ideally, I've always said jokingly throughout my whole career is that my job is to put myself out of a job by making so many comments and recommendations on the user interface that you don't need to write documentation. I'm still waiting for that to happen.
The only reason, okay, so whenever I hear somebody say that, it makes me mad. So I'm just gonna point out that I've heard that speech from engineering managers for the last 20 years. It's like, oh, we're going to make this so easy to use that we won't need documentation. I said, I've heard that for 20 years. You know what? I'm still here. I'm still working. So anyway, I don't think we'll ever get to that point.
Oh, you're not still working. I am, though.
Well, I know, but I don't think we'll ever get to that point. I mean, I will say that the one big success is cell phones. Okay. We've gotten to the point in cell phones where everybody knows how to use a cell phone.
Yes.
It's like driving. It's become like driving. And that would be the dream of any product that comes out, to do that, to make it so that it's the second nature, right? But that's hard.
Do you know how many times I've had to, when I'm looking at the user interface, to say, use the term industry standard. And I say, it's like, okay, everybody knows what this means in this field. Okay, we don't need to define it because it's so common. It's like driving.
Right.
Okay, and so I would always try to push them back towards industry standard terms and behavior, because it's just, if we click this, a user is naturally going to expect this type of behavior because a lot of other products do it the same way. So that is an important aspect of user experience.
And what's interesting is, I use it as an example of driving, but some cars, they put things in odd places. They're still screwing around with it, right? And so it's kind of like you expect something to be here, and it turns out, oh, this lever usually does that. No, now all of a sudden I'm washing my windows when I was trying to put on the turn signals. So they're still screwing around with that. They don't understand the idea of industry standard.
Or trying to redefine it, which doesn't always work.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
No. And then, okay, I'm going to go into a term I recently coined and I put on LinkedIn. I'm calling it an information specialist. And here's how I defined an information specialist. One of the things that I've always tried to do all my career in technical writing is to map the information that marketing presents to the world to the documentation. Hey, the marketing says we do X, Y, and Z better than anybody else. And, buy our product and you'll be able to do X, Y, and Z. And so my job is, as I'm documenting the product is to somehow incorporate the X, Y, and Z definition and put it into the documentation saying this is exactly how you can accomplish X, Y, and Z. Do you know how many times I was not able to do that? I mean, some companies were incredibly poor, and I couldn't map the marketing message or material into the documentation. There are other times where it's vague and I had to redefine it. So, as an information specialist, I'm stepping into that gray area between marketing and documentation, and saying, okay, marketing saying this is how it affects you, your environment, this product, and staying within the marketing message and influence the marketing message if necessary. I go to a website all the time and it'll say wonderful things about the product, but you still don't know what the product is really doing.
Right.
And so that is the question. If your potential customers don't understand what your product is really doing within their environment, you've missed the point. And this is where an information specialist can come in and take and answer those types of questions.
But interestingly enough, it's okay. So this goes back to something I was trying to do a number of years ago, where I actually wrote a proposal to a company to create an information. Again, it was a management role. I wanted an information director, somebody who could take all these different information providers within a company, whether it's marketing, whether it's engineering, whether it's support, whether it's sales, and coordinate all that stuff so that it all said the same thing. Now, as it turns out in the medical device world, they have to do that. They have to map. If they say that the product does X, they have to map that to a feature in the product that proves that that statement is true.
It's a well-regulated field.
Right. FDA requires that. So there's a whole discipline in the medical device field of just doing that mapping, making sure that there's a map. You know, you say the product does this, you have to map it to a feature and then prove that the product does what you say it does. If it doesn't, then you're in trouble. Now, in the outer side of the medical field, it's a little bit. There's this whole thing where, you know, marketing's out there saying one thing, sales is out there saying another thing. Sometimes engineering is saying another thing, and there's no one or no organization that looks across all of that.
No coordination.
Exactly. Technical writers sometimes end up falling into that role. Now, you go into startups, so you kind of naturally fall into that role. Yes. But in larger companies, it requires a little bit. It's a little bit harder to do that. Let's put it that way.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
That's why I like startups.
I know.
Yeah, so that would be an information specialist. And I think you get an idea of, you know, if you go into technical writing, there is so much more to it. There's so many fascinating aspects of it. You know, and some people will go into marketing writing, which I think is great too. It's not technical writing, but it's closely related.
Right.
You know,
I mean, you have to have, it's the same skills apply. You still need to know how to communicate, and you need to understand the technology. So there's some similarities. It's just the style of writing is very different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've tried marketing writing. I've done some of that stuff too, and it's fascinating. But it's not really where I want it to be. I'm more into the aspect of how do I get this product into my environment? How do I get it up and running? How can I use it to accomplish those things that I'm buying this for?
Yeah, I mean, it's, okay, so the thing about writing, and I guess I'm going to stray a little bit, but the thing about writing, and whether you call it technical writing or you call it marketing writing or you call it business writing, they're all related in that the idea is that you have a company or a product and you still have to do the user analysis. Like if you're trying to do a marketing piece, okay, who am I writing this to? Am I writing this to the CEO level person? Am I writing this to a person who's actually doing the job? Who am I writing this marketing piece to? You need to really understand your audience, even if you're doing a marketing piece.
Yes.
If you're doing a business piece, it's like, okay, who is the person who actually holds the purse strings? Who's the person who's going to decide whether to spend the money on this product?
Knowing the decision maker is key.
Exactly. And so even in a regular low-level technical writing product description, right? The person who decides whether this product is bought and used it can sometimes be the same person that ends up using it or not, but you need to understand both of those perspectives so that when you write the product, so a buying decision will come down to two things. price, and effectiveness, right? So if your product's effective, and that's one of the ways that they find out if it's effective is by reading user documentation. So all of that all that stuff has to be coordinated and related. And most big companies, it's all done by different people, and they don't necessarily talk to each other because they think their goals are different when really and truly their goals are the same. So anyway, I'm retired now, so I don't care. But this was something I was trying to push 20 years ago, because I saw that problem. It's like, okay, yeah, these people aren't communicating, and these people are going off that way. These people are going off that way. They need somebody who can go work across all of that. And in a technical writing role, it was very difficult to do, especially marketing. Marketing was like a brick wall. So, like I said, you're in startups, so it makes it easier for you to flow across these organizations because it's 5 of you, right? Right. So, but in larger corporations, it's much more difficult. Much more difficult.
So I think you can see that the scope of technical writing really goes on and on and on. If you're interested in being an effective communicator and writing about products and stuff, this career has a lot of fascinating facets to it, and you can grow. And we've made long careers out of out of this, and we still find it fascinating up to a point, and we still get passionate about it. I think that came across.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we've answered all your questions about how to be a technical writer and the different levels and the different aspects. And I'm sure with the advent of AI, it's going to become even more interesting in the future. So until then, take care. And we'll be seeing you soon. We'd like to thank Matt, our recording engineer, and the Sterling-Lancaster Community TV for recording us and letting us use their expensive equipment so we didn't have to pay for it.
And letting me rant.
And letting Archie rant. Take care.